Humanities, organized by the Venice Centre for Digital and Public Humanities at the Department for Humanities of Foscari University of Venice. And this series is organized by my wonderful team, so namely by Federico Boschetti, Paolo Monella, Tiziana Mancinelli, and Linda Spinazze. So thank you again for this, for organizing this very successful series of seminars. Today is the Day of the Age worldwide, online, organized by CenterNet, the International Network of Digital Humanities Centers, and everyone is tweeting to create a record of what future scientists and sociologists and historians of science will then use as data to analyze what we are actually doing as digital humanists or as digital art historians. This is a nice way also to present the work, and especially of our today's speaker, of Barbara Tramelli, what we are actually doing. And so I'm a little bit tempted also to, as a warm-up, to ask the audience participants to give a short definition of what digital art history actually is in the chat. So if you are bold enough, you're invited to use our chat and give a short definition of what, in your regard, is digital art history. So, and maybe we take the best suggestions then and put them on our Twitter account. So just as an invitation. Before so my name is Franz Fischer. I'm the director of the Venice Centre for Digital and Public Humanities. And before I introduce you to today's speaker, to Barbara Tramelli, just some very practical instructions. So it's all straightforward and easy to do. Barbara will give a half an hour, 3/4 of an hour presentation of a project. And you are invited to post questions, comments into the chat, which you can open if you click on the speech bubble in the upper right corner of the screen. Then the chat appears and you can just type in a concise manner your questions, or if you want to elaborate a little bit on your comment or question, you can just say, I would like to say something, and then I give you the word after Barbara's talk. So I will either read then your questions, or we will read them together, or you can then switch on your microphone and ask your question yourself or give a comment. During the talk, I would like to ask you to please put your microphone on mute and also to close the camera. So I think that's at least slightly improving the quality of the transmission. Then for the discussion and for the question and answers round, you can then reactivate your microphone. No, not your microphone, but your video, and your microphone only if you have something to say. You do this by clicking on the screen, and then a bar appears at the bottom of your screen where you can activate and disactivate a microphone and camera. So that should be all straightforward. Please keep in mind, we make a record of this, of the full seminar, so including discussion, and we will put this online on YouTube after the seminar. Links also to the slides and all the materials that will be shown during this seminar will be accessible from our GitHub repository. So you will find all the materials, links to the materials from our website, which you can explore anyway if you have nothing else to do. We just added a section on the research that is being carried out at our center from us ourselves or by colleagues at the department or partners connected to our center. Okay, this as much as for the practical instructions and the general framework. I will now briefly introduce you to Barbara, and then we can start with today's seminar. So Barbara Tramelli is currently a research fellow at the Venice Centre for Digital and Public Humanities. After graduating with a Master of Arts in Cultural and Intellectual History at the Warburg Institute in London, she has been awarded a doctoral degree in art history from Freie Universität Berlin in 2015. Barbara has been a pre- and postdoc fellow at the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science in Berlin. She worked as a research associate at the Warburg Institute and most recently at the University of Oxford and in Lyon as a collaborator of the Biblissima project. She published on Giovanni Paolo Lomazzo on his treatise on the art of painting, published in 1584, and an art and books production in Renaissance and early modern times. And today she will be talking about a current research project, which is situated in the field of digital art history and digital book history, so very much in the center and the focus of our fields of research at the center, and more precisely on the iconography and the secret life, so to say, of images in and independent from early modern prints. And the title of her talk is Le chemin de l'image in Renaissance Lyon, digital tools for the study of early modern illustrations. So thank you very much, Barbara, for preparing this talk to us, and we look forward to your presentation now.
And thank you very much, Franz. I really would like to thank you, the organizers.
I hope.
Can you hear me well?
Not very good right now, but maybe it's improving now. Your image is frozen.
I just shared.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
No, it's fine. I think it's fine. So I would ask everyone please to switch on mute your microphone and to stop the video, the camera, so we have a better quality in the transmission. And I will do the same. So the floor is now yours, Barbara, and I will interrupt you if we incur technical problems.
Yes, thank you, Franz. I am currently sharing my screen. I hope you can see the PowerPoint that I'm going to show you. Just a confirmation, the first title page.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So here we go. Well, I would like to thank you and the organizers of the seminar, Paolo, Linda, Tiziana, Federico, and all the colleagues from the Venice Centre for Digital and Public Humanities for making it possible to present my work in this seminar today, which focuses on my project on the study of digital collections of early modern illustrated books and follows the lines of the Biblissima project I was chargé de mission for, namely Les Livres Illustrés à Lyon, until last year. In this presentation, I aim at outlining how digital softwares I used and I am using for my research on 16th century images constitute essential research tools for an early modern art historian and cultural historian such as myself. Starting from the case study of Renaissance Lyon, I aim at giving you an overview of how the features of these tools, namely the Warburg Institute iconographic database in London and the image matching software developed by the Visual Geometry Group in Oxford, are helping my research, which aims at understanding the world and the path of printed images in 16th century Lyon, from creation to share and reuse. And how these tools are helping me outlining the iconographic differences and similarities of these images. And finally, how can they be useful in order to understanding the editorial strategies and the artistic choices behind the production of early modern illustrated books, whose popularity grew during the course of the 16th century. But first of all, a bit of background. Why Renaissance Lyon? Now, the printing industry in Lyon during the Renaissance is characterized by the importance given to illustrations. Lyon printing workshops published an estimated number of books not inferior to Paris during the 16th century, arguably distinguishing themselves from the Parisian production because of the primary role given to illustrations. We estimate that the number of books printed during the course of our 100 years in the city is over 20,000, and you can see here a tentative graphic with a majority of religious books, and then law books, classical authors, and then so forth and so on, medical literature and poetry. Of these books, an estimate of at least 2,000 are illustrated, so around 10%. The Presse Lyonnaise are also famous for having published the first illustrated book in France, namely Le Miroir de la Rédemption de l'Humain Lignage, published in 1478, which is a French edition of the Speculum Humanae Salvationis, and was translated into French by the monk Julien Machaut. The early printers who worked in the city, such as Barthélemy Bayer, Mathieu Hus, and Jean Sibert, used German woodblocks at first, but they soon started to commission new illustrations to local artists, which we can find in a very varied types of books, from Bibles to books of emblems, from herbalia to maps and descriptions of exotic countries, and so forth. The book industry there arguably knew its apogee during the years 1540-1560, before the War of Religions, when printers such as Jean de Tournes, father and son, and Guillaume Roville started to cooperate with artists and engravers such as Pierre Escrich and Bernard Salomon, two of the most famous engravers at the time, but I will come back to them. The project Le Livre Illustré à Lyon, 1480-1600, started from an idea and under the scientific direction of Professor Richard Cooper from Oxford, to whom I'm greatly indebted, and it was funded by the Equipex Biblissima until 2019. It is now continuing thanks to the generous support of the Venice Centre for Digital and Public Humanities in Foscari University in Venice. The project involved 3 libraries and 3 research institutes: the Bibliothèque Municipale in Lyon, which holds the largest collection of printed editions of the period, the Oxford Libraries, which hold around 4,000, including the college libraries, the Visual Geometry Group of the University of Oxford, directed by Professor Andrew Zisserman, and the Warburg Institute, which is currently hosting the collection of iconographically indexed images in their database of its photographic collection. Also involved were the ENSIB, where with Professor Raphaël Morin, we held 2 editions in 2018 and 2019, respectively, of a summer school dedicated to early modern illustrated books, the Centre Gabriel Naudet and the Centre d'études supérieures de la Renaissance à Tours, in Tours. So what are we aiming to do? What did we aim to do? Now, first, there was the need to identify the illustrated editions, of which we did not know much. In this respect, essentials were the bibliographic studies of Henri Baudrier and Göttingen, for instance. Then, the second aim was to identify the iconography and the iconographic subjects, how they were developed and how they were modified during the century. Related to this, we ask also how illustrations affect or not the diffusion of the books. Finally, we ask how the images were reused, that is, le chemin de l'image. How did artists and printers share woodblocks and other working tools? But not only the tools, also the iconographic trends, that is, the ideas, the imagery, the visual repertoire of illustrations. The project therefore intertwines different disciplines, from digital book history to art and cultural history, as well as to the emerging field of technical art history. Now, so far, I have gathered 1,350 illustrated editions during the course of my research. For the first months of research at the Bibliothèque Municipale of Lyon, and I would really like to thank the curators there, especially Benjamin Javier Mazzocco and Jérôme Sirdet, for their help, and subsequently in the Baudelaire libraries. And I'm very grateful to the curator Sarah Wheel for providing me a list of 4,000 16th century Lyon imprints, of which at least 150 I found are illustrated. Now, what do I mean by illustrated? This brings me to the fundamental question of what is an illustration and what do we consider as object of iconographical analysis. Now, the tough decision was made to analyze and include in the corpus only the illustrations which were iconographically relevant. This excluded, for the time being, the printer's marks, the marque d'imprimeur, and the ornamental letters, the lettrines, ornées, and everything that one can define as eye candy in an illustrated page, excluding also title pages if they were not iconographically relevant. As I said earlier, the first printed illustrated book in France was notably the French edition of the Speculum Humanae Salvazioni, Le Miroir de la Rédemption de l'Humain Lignage. This book was published in 1478, and the blocks are the same in the three other editions, one printed in 1479, one in 1482, and one printed in 1483. It is a translation of a German adaptation which appeared in Basel in 1476. As is well known, the book was widely spread through Europe, both in manuscript as well as in printed form. It narrates the history of fall and redemption according to typology, which was a way to read the scripture based on the idea that every single story of the New Testament is announced with a specular story of the Old Testament. It is therefore quite an interesting book to index. And you can find it in the database. Julien Marchaud was an Augustine monk from Lyon, devoted to the spread of French translation of religious books in order to nourish the reflection and prayers of Christians who could read French but not Latin. And in this respect, we have an example of the basic function of the image in book, to make the stories accessible and to be able to reach a wider public of men who could not read. The blocks here are reused from the edition printed in Basel. Now, in the 20 years before 1500, we have a substantial number of printed in cunabula, which include different publications, among which an edition of Le Propriétaire des Choses by Bartholomew Anglicus, printed in 1482, which contains different images, and I'm showing here actually not a very good image of the property of fire, air, earth, and water. Booksellers and printers also saw different economic possibilities in printing the so-called Romans de la Chevalerie, which you have an example of in Les Quatre Filles d'Amont, printed in 1485, and Pontus et la Belle Sidonie in 1488. Other books illustrated are illustrated edition of Aesop, published by Hus, using German woodblocks in 1484, and then later by Maréchal and Chaussard in 1499 with reverse woodblocks. The images of Aesop then became very popular, and different editions were given to print, and they can be found in other types of books, such as emblem books. During the first years of the 16th century, the market of books in Lyon evolved towards the so-called cheap book, that is, chivalry book, lives of saints, almanacs, farces. Other new printers became popular in the city, such as the print house of Arnouillet or Bassarin, which edited different books by Symphorien Champier, with woodblocks ordered and paid by the author himself. Now, I have a provisional estimate of which kind of books were illustrated during the century in Lyon. But this is not exhaustive at all. It includes religious books, emblem books, literature, allegorical books, antiquities, such book of medals and coins, the macro category of scientific or pseudo-scientific publication, which includes geography, architecture, botany, astrology, astronomy, and alchemy, and then model and pattern books. Now, I cannot sum up in an hour this substantial corpus, but I wanted to give you an idea of the vast material I'm dealing with in order to explain the need to start with a case study, and that is with the production of two artists, namely Bernard Salomon and Pierre Esclic, who is also called Basil Crouch, who work respectively for Jean de Tournes and Guillaume Roville. They were taken as case studies at the beginning of the project, mainly because of the great number of woodblocks they produced, and because of the similar iconographic types which they copied from one another. And I show you here just two examples. On the left, you see the Ark of Noah from the Quadrant Historique by Bernard Salomon, printed by the Tournes in 1583. Actually, this is a later edition. There is another edition in 1553. And on the right, one by Pierre Esclic, an image by Pierre Esclic, taken from Les Figures de la Bible, printed by Guillaume Roville in 1564. The corpus of these two engravers is not limited to religious religious images, but also includes emblems, fables, medals, and so on. Now, above 1,350 illustrated editions have been gathered so far, and 3,350 files were created in the Warburg Institute database under Creative Commons license. They concern not only the illustration production of the Tournes and Roville, but also some of the highlights of illustrated Lyonnais productions, such as the Speculum de Delhi or several books of emblems. Now, the database indexation is based on iconographic types, which allows a high degree of flexibility in the range of categories, as well as the possibility of multiple indexation of the same image as if needed. It was first designed to put online the photographic corpus in the photographic collection of the Warburg Institute. And I really thank Dr. Rembrandt Witt and Dr. Kurt Taylor, respectively, Deputy Curator and Curator of the photographic collection, for their help. The indexation work is essential in order to pin down the trends and popularity of certain type of illustration over others, to trace the iconographic development of specific categories of images over the course of the century, and to investigate the relationship between image and text. From these main categories, which I'm not reading here, you can then explore different subcategories, such if you click on magic and science, you can then see all the subcategories, including physiology, alchemy, divination, and prophecy, and all images related to that. Now, I will explain a little bit how it works. When using it, either the users, and if you want to find an image, once you find it, either the user is redirected to the digital copy of the book from which the image is taken, or one can also download a PDF from a raster file created with a high-quality image. This depends on the type of images which I was able to use for my research purposes. The second method is certainly preferable, as it allows to see the details of images and of the scenes depicted. Moreover, and this is mentioned only in passing, the possibility to have access to the high-quality images allow researchers to analyze in detail the work and style of the artist. We do not often find the woodblocks from which these images were printed, and this is especially relevant in order to derive the method of working the surfaces and to answer all questions concerning techniques, style, material used. Now, to come back to the indexation, the database is quite flexible. We can index one image under different categories. And here I show you a very basic example, an image taken from L'Hymne du Temps et de ses parties, published by the Tournes in 1560, where the illustration has been categorized under month, January, and under two-faced god, Janus, Jano bifronte. Also, to answer one of the project questions, you can see here, for instance, 3 different editions of Petrarca Trionfi, printed by 2 by Guillaume Roville in 1551 and 1558, and 1 printed by the Tournes in 1547. And you can see the 3 different portraits of Laura and Petrarca, and the comparison is quite intuitive and quite straightforward in the database. It is a very intuitive method that allows to see iconographic developments of same subjects and how different artists have reinterpreted them, so as to form a direct, well, hopefully a direct, but many ways indirect path. And here again, you see from Petrarca Trionfi, you see the Triumph of Eternity, one by Salomon, the other by 2 by Pierre Escrit. And you see also where an image, the same image, has been used in another context, that is the 4th image from left, that is the Triumph of Eternity, the same image used in the Portrait d'Hiver. And then the first one is an image of the Triumph of Eternity from Milan, and it is not part of my collection, but it is part of the collection of the iconographic database. Now, a bit of details concerning the metadata that I included in my collection. So among the iconography explained, and here I take an emblem image from the Delhi of Maurice Sèvres, you find other details. And if you can see further down, you have further details with the type of print. So it's a woodcut. You find the motto transcribed. When the artist is not known, we just name it Lyon. Then we find the date. And then below, you find the textbook where the image is being taken from. Further down, the collection, where it comes from. And in this case, there is the special collection called Les Livres Illustrés à Lyon of the Equipex Biblissima. And then I included some useful links, that is, and being as consistent as possible, the Universal Short Title Catalog, the Bibliothèque Municipale Catalog entry, a complete digital copy of the book, and sometimes also links to other projects that could be of use. For instance, this project on French emblems at Glasgow, which has been extremely useful for what concerned the part on the emblem books. Now, the database was not built specifically for the project. As I said, it was built to put online the large collection of images belonging to the photographic collection of the Warburg Institute. And I was one of the first external cooperations. On the positive outputs, I must say that I was able to contribute to the implementation of images in the database, metadata, and ontologies such as the subcategories. So enlarging this corpus of images of this alive tool. Creating new subcategories, which is an extremely versatile method to include new iconographic categories, other users can benefit from them, and these contribute to the life of this constant developing tool. Then I was also able to categorize books which were quite tricky to categorize, such as, for instance, the Livre des Anneaux de Pierre Bourrieux. This is taken from the Western Library in Oxford, which is basically a catalogue of 16th century fashion rings. Or even more cryptic, a book such as Les Portraits d'Hiver, which is a book which provides a sample of different kinds of illustrations, which were also used in other books such as the Key Romance or the Sausalie. And it also includes these illustrations of theatrical stages. And this one was probably used as a sample book. The database also allows you to compare different images from manuscript to printed form, so as to underline the sort of building of layout conventions of a printed page. And you can see here two different Ark of Noah, one taken from a manuscript of Guillaume de Braille, a 13th century manuscript, and one from Roville. And you can see here the comparison with the one of the Tournes, much more similar. Now, one crucial point of my project was also to trace the reuse of these images in different books. These metadata were provisionally placed by hand under the category additional image description or additional image information. And this is one of the essential information in order to pin down the reuse of same images respectively in different editions of the same book, as well as in different books. Now, this feature allowed to understand how the image is circulated and the ways in which printers and engravers cooperated and copied. But with such images, such as this is one of the building of the tabernacle, which are recurrent in so many books, it was quite a burdensome task to do by hand, basically by me. And I come here to the second tool, which helped me greatly in my research, which is the Imagematching tool of the Visual Geometry Group of the University of Oxford. I am greatly indebted to Dr. Abhishek Dutta for helping me with putting on and create the demo. And this is part of a larger project which is funded by the C by Byte project. And it was already used in research projects such as, for instance, the project of Cristina Dondi and Matilde Malaspina, the Baudin Ballads research project. Now, we set up a demo. I contributed with the images, and then Dr. Abhishek Dutta set up the demo, where I put my collection. Now, how does this work? This automatic image retrieval. The visual search capability of this demo relies on the Visual Geometry Group image search engine. It can search instantaneously through a corpus of almost 10,000 images that I provided of 16th century printed illustrations, using image regions as a search query. This allows to see the use and reuse of the same and similar printed images. The Vise software is able to find and match these regions of an image, so as when you click on the image or select a part of the image, such as, for instance, the creation of Eve from Adam that I show you here, the image content is scaled, translated, and it can detect the similar images that I put in the collection. It is quite straightforward. Also, it is able to flip, compare. Now it's just a presentation in PowerPoint, but in the actual demo, if you click on the middle image, you can switch from one image to the other to compare it directly. How does it work? As you can see here, and I thank Dr. Matilde Malaspina for sharing this slide with me, here are depicted the regions denoted by the ellipses. The visual content in each region is denoted using a feature vector, such as a sequence of numbers, which are capable of summarizing the visual content of the region, so that the regions which have similar visual content produce similar features. Then the detection and feature vector computation is performed on all the images in the demo. The vectors are transformed into a representation that allows a fast comparison of feature vectors, resulting in a ranked list of matching images with the most perfect match appearing at the top. Now, the more we can expand this tool, the more useful it will become, as we know that illustrations of woodblock, and as well as iconographic themes and subject, travel from one century to another in many interesting ways. But first of all, I should again explain a little bit the features of this demo. You can see the file name. For the file name, I used the USTC catalog, so the Universal Short Title Catalog, the catalog name, and then the page number. Then you can see here the different regions that the image matching detects. And then you can see the score threshold. This score threshold, what is it? It basically tells you which kind of similarity you want to have in your result. Here we have a score threshold of 8, so we have a lot of images that are not very similar. We have the first 5 identical, and then you start with the images that are not similar. But if you high up this number, you can find the images that are actually the most similar to the one you want to search. I should also add that the Vise software can find and match the regions that can be detected also in not ideal conditions. That is, when the image content is scaled, translated, rotated, or when the quality of the image is not perfect, which is very useful. And there are all sorts of changes when photographing or scanning objects, mainly concerning the viewpoints or the illumination. So it can detect also an image that is not perfect in quality or viewpoint or so forth. As I'm saying, the more we can expand this tool, the more useful it will become, as we know that illustration travel very much from century to another. I'm actually discussing with Dr. Malaspina and Dr. Dutta so that we can improve the collection, inviting more institutions and scholars to contribute with the image in the database. One challenge is to name all the images with shared and agreed upon bibliographic metadata, similar to the ISTC and the May database that are used for 15th century, and to find a unique pertaining denominator for the 16th century as well. And again, at the moment, I'm using the Universal Short Title Catalog number. Also, I'm working with Dr. Dutta and Dr. Malaspina in order to have a new shared experimental and expanded demo, which combines my images of 16th century and Dr. Malaspina 15th century images, to see how and to what extent it can work. And the aim is also that a researcher can have the possibility to access this with his own credentials and can therefore contribute images autonomously. But again, this is in the future. For the moment, I'm very happy to say that I can much more easily OIS, and you can also export, of course, your search results. Now, I'm very happy to say that I can easily trace the chemin de l'image for instance, for this kind of image, which is very much recurrent in the 16th century. And here we have also the woodblock that comes from. And I come from the last part, which concern actually woodblocks. So I'm not only inquiring on printed images, on prints, but I'm also very interested in the kind of matrices of which we do not have many surviving. This block is a part of a wonderful collection at the Musée de l'Imprimerie et des Arts Graphiques in Lyon, which is a wonderful place, and it holds 400 16th century woodblocks in their magazzini, along with reproduction of tools for working wood, some displayed in permanent collection. I thank the curator, Hélène Sibylle Bertrand, for helping me tracing the corresponding matrices attributed or after Salomon and others, and to let me show them to my students during l'École d'été. It's a wonderful museum for anybody interested in printing industry, and its collection ranges from the start, so from Gutenberg, until nowadays. Now, woodblocks are for me especially interesting in order to understand what I call the early path of the image, from birth to carving, before sharing. Again, there are not many surviving woodblocks, and as they were widely used and worn out, and when not sold, inherited, exchanged. And we have, for instance, this one surviving, which was used in the Bible in different editions of the Biblia Sacra, Quadrant Historique aussi. So for every kind of person's burial. So whenever you have the burial of Sarah or the burial of Noah, the burial of the other biblical people, you get this image. And this would also open up the topic of generic images, but I would go off track. So how am I exploiting this material? I'm happy to say that a second demo was made, including these woodblocks, which are around 1,000 and are including in that second demo with the 9,000 images of prints. So what we want to see is that if it is possible to connect the two. So to connect the block to the image and block to block. So it will actually employ the same method of the first demo to see that if we trace the region, even when the picture is not ideal. And for now, we can see that it can trace same image of the woodblock, same picture of a woodblock. Also when, for instance, the image is not completely frontal, but it's also partly dilato, so partly sided. So this is also an experimental demo, which opens up very, very interesting possibilities, and I do hope to develop it further. Now to conclude and to open up the floor, I would like to outline some of the further developments that I'm thinking of for my research with my colleagues. Well, starting from the latter, I would really love the inclusion of woodblocks in the image matching and to see if it's possible to work, as they are very, very interesting materials. Then we want to make the images compatible with the IIIF system, so the International Image Interoperability Center. Then, again, with Dr. Matilde Malaspina, we would want to merge the 15th and 16th century corpus of images, because the more we can nourish these tools, the more useful they will become, and the more researchers will find it of use in their own research. And then I will continue the cooperation with the libraries and collection with their digitizing projects. And I have links to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, where I would like to thank Nathalie Coilly and Louisa Mazan for their help. They have a different type of iconographic system. They have the Iconocans, but they are they're willing and available to digitize and prioritize books for the digitization that are helpful for the project. And also the curator at the Bibliothèque de Sainte-Geneviève, de Fort-Ancien, Nathalie Rollet-Breclan, who gave me the same availability. So I truly hope this work will continue, and I hope it was entertaining enough, my presentation. I would like to finish it here and to hear about comments, our questions, our discussions. So I thank you very, very much for coming here and for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Barbara, for this very impressive and beautiful series of images and prints. We have now a lot of time and space to ask questions and start a discussion. So everyone is invited, and several comments have been posted already into the chat, which you open if you click on the upper in the upper right corner on the speech bubble. So there are a lot of complimenti, first of all, and several references. So thank you very much for everyone who has references which are of interest for everyone working in this field. So we will, if there are no trolls appearing during our discussion, which actually happened in the past, we will also publish the chat. So you should not lose any information that is being exchanged here at our seminar. I will now try to get an overview about the questions and either ask you to read your question or to elaborate your question if you just say you would like to ask or make a comment by voice. And if I am or the colleagues are missing an intervention, then please just post it again. So I try to start from the top. And in the during our whole seminar, you're still invited to post your definition of digital art history. Maybe it has changed during this seminar, so that would be a great success. Focus is now, of course, on Barbara's research project. And I'm sure also you, Barbara, will have questions to the audience, because this is an open project and with a lot of potential. And you will further develop it, and every input from experts or intelligent questions will be very useful and helpful for all of us. So there is a first question by Joost de Puit. Ornamental initials and printers' marks were excluded from the project. What about ornamental frames and cartouches around relevant book illustrations, Barbara?
Yes, this is a very, thank you for the question. I mean, everything that was considered purely ornamental, have a not iconographical interest, or that could not be describable iconographically. I know production has a lot of ornamental frames that are beautiful, but they were not the center of the project. So they were not, I mean, I did preferably put the whole page online, so not to separate the ornament from the actual iconographic illustration. But no, they were not part of the corpus specifically. So whatever you could describe as an eye candy or ornamental, it was not the focus of the project. It doesn't mean that it is not there either directly or indirectly, for instance, in the Warburg database, because either you have the illustrated page as a whole, or when you have just the iconographic image, you also have a link to the online edition, and then you can find the whole page with ornaments as well. Another thing, it was about the lettrines historiées. So, for instance, the letters that are not ornamental letters but historiated, they were included when possible. Thank you for the question.
We have then several remarks by Gilles Bergel. Thank you very much for this. And you also have some experience with matching woodblocks and images. And you are noting that you have to flip them, of course. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on this? I think this is a core interest of this project, so the matching of woodblocks and images.
Yes. Actually, it's the same comment. I mean, with Dr. Dutta, we did discuss how to make them readable. Yes, we have to flip them and also modify a little bit the image, because they are a bit tougher to read. But it is possible. I also want to see. I see the experiments the link that you post. I will look into that because it's at an early stage, but I do believe it's a very interesting development of this software, if we could include the woodblocks as part of the collection. And we do have, I did take many pictures of them. As you also see in the presentation, sometimes they are not ideally taken from the viewpoint or from the ideal illumination, but if they can be read, so it's worth also going towards that direction, in my opinion. And thank you for the comments, actually, very, very, very much.
May I intervene here? This is Giles speaking.
Yeah, please.
Wonderful presentation, Barbara. Thank you very much. Specifically, I'm very excited to see someone else is working on image recognition and woodcuts and wood blocks themselves, rather. And I know Justus is here, and we've had conversations about doing the same with Plantin Moretus wood blocks. This is really quite an interesting problem from a computer vision point of view, as well as an art historical point of view. And just to elaborate on my point that, yes, of course, you need to flip your block, because although Vice VGG image search engine is tolerant to changes of scale and of shearing, as Barbara showed very clearly in her presentation, the geometric transformation that flipping, as in printing, engenders needs to be corrected. I mean, we could correct that. I should say I work for VGG, I should declare an interest. So we could, alongside Dr. Abhishek Dutta, so we could correct for that. That's one step. The other step, of course, is that the surface area of the block and the ratio between the relief and the subsurface is often very shallow. Blocks are very low contrast, so it's much harder to extract the visual features, the local features that Vice uses to match between printed impressions. Now, I've been doing some experiments with various advanced imaging technologies, such as RTI, reflectance transformation imaging. 3D imaging, photogrammetry or laser scanning will work, but is rather cumbersome and expensive. But I'm also working with imaging professionals at UCL, and would welcome comment and expressions of interest. Anyone else is doing this on, if you like, a kind of a cheap and fast way of just getting a picture of a block that extracts sufficient relief in order to do the matching, because it's like I say, it's a genuine technical interest. And of course, for institutions, many of them have many thousands of blocks in drawers and they don't know where they appeared. You can take an off print of them and use that to match, but maybe that's not possible for curatorial reasons. So this is definitely something that is needed, I think, and I along you. I'll catch you later, Barbara, about this, but anyone else, I'd love to discuss this with you.
Please. Yes, it's a very interesting topic for me too, and thank you for all your remarks. And it has also a lot to do with the quality of the image and how much contrast you can get. And yes, but we'll talk more. I hope we'll catch later on this as well.
So if I understand correctly, there has not been yet a digitization project in place or carried out on woodblocks. Is this right?
Well, I have here a comment.
Systematic, yeah.
Not systematic that I know of, but that doesn't mean much. I have here a person that is Just Depuis, probably pronounced very wrong, sorry about that. At the Plantin Moretus Museum, we are digitizing and describing the entire collection of 40,000 woodblocks of the Officina Plantiniana, which is a wonderful collection. And thank you for the possibility to come and study them. Because they are interesting material from a different point of view, not only art historical, but from history of knowledge in the broader sense, and also technical art history. They're quite challenging object of research. So yes, thank you.
Jos, if you could briefly tell us about the project, so which technology you are using, so and which formats for describing the collection. So that would be, I think, of high interest for the participants here. So if you want to click on your microphone.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Okay. Well, our project has started last year and it will run until the end of this year. and we try to digitally photograph every single woodblock, and we have already digitized off-prints of the blocks that were made in the 1960s. So we can match a print and the block itself. And we also try to work out in which editions these blocks were used. And the archives of the Officina Plantiniana are, of course, very helpful to work out in which editions they were used or which artists were involved in making the blocks.
Which imaging technology? So you are working from analog pictures and digitize these pictures, or do you also do from the originals?
No, we digitize the original blocks with a digital camera. And in the 1960s, prints were made from these original blocks, and we have digitized these prints with a scanner. So, and all these images are freely available online in our database. And we are now also trying to describe the blocks so that people can have access to the collection.
Thank you. Peter Bell has a remark in this context.
Yes, thank you for the talk and also this last remark. If you already match the blocks with the prints, it would be great to have a database of these pairs, because then there can be there can be a transfer learning through the correspondences between these two media, and it could be then used in a retrieval because these correspondences are learned. And it's kind of a style transfer problem that we know how it looks like on the block and how it would look like on the print afterward. And with this learning on this ground truth, it will help to solve tasks Barbara or others would have.
Yes. I mean, for now, we have just able to match woodblock from woodblock. But with some, again, with some work on the woodblocks themselves, it will be possible to compare woodblock and print. So that will take the analysis to a different level. If I'm answering your, well, wasn't really a question, but a remark.
Yeah.
There is another question by Beth Fisher, and she's interested in the use of IIIF. Has this been applied in the field so far? So that would also be a question of mine if there are details from wood blocks or wood cuts that are used. So, or is it always the entire object that is then being used for or reused for new prints? So that would make it again more complex. And to discuss and analyze details, of course, IIIF would be the perfect choice then to match details of print or scans of printed images and the wood blocks.
Yes, thank you for the question. Starting from what you said last, indeed it's possible to select also just a detail of the wood block. And it's also very interesting that we have sometimes combined wood blocks. I mean, the illustrated page, the book as a complex object, and the illustrated page of as a complex object constituted by different wood blocks sometimes, you know. Then some, for instance, the frames are very much reused and others are not. So you can find, you know, different results as an illustrated page. So with this technology, it would be possible to also select part of a woodblock or a combined woodblock. So it would be even more interesting. On IIIF, it's something that the visual geometry group is actually working on. I don't know their time frame, but I know it's one of the next developments that they want to make it compatible, because this technology, as Franz underlines, it's very useful in order to actually see the details of the image itself. So it's one of the developments. I'm not, I'm an external cooperator, so I don't know their time frame, but it's gonna happen quite soon, I think.
Then we have two questions. One question by Savino Rua, and he's asking if whether there is arms or heraldic shields, or just a question if someone knows. So if anybody knows about projects which are focusing on armorials or heraldic shields with a similar approach, please post a reference in the chat, or Barbara about this.
I know.
If the image.
I know there was a project on heraldry in the Lyon publication. It escapes me the name of the person, but I know some a project on heraldry has done for what concern Lyon heraldic. I think the person to contact is probably Monique Hulvet, which is in charge of Numelio and the digitized collection of the Bibliothèque Municipale of Lyon. And she remembers there was probably a doctoral project of someone working on heraldry, Lyonnais heraldic armors. I can give you the link to the digitized project of the Bibliothèque Municipale of Lyon, because I know of this one. Probably there are others, but I did not focus on heraldry especially, so I don't know others. Hope this is helpful.
I'm sorry, I'm back in case you missed me. Now the problem for me is I lost the whole history of the thread of the chat. So please, my colleagues, team members, please help and pose questions and ask participants to ask their questions by voice. So I lost the complete chat once you are out of the yeah.
Yes, and thank you to.
Sorry.
Thank you for the question on IIIF. There was posted a link by Dr. Bergel about the timeline of the Vise geometry group and IIIF. So just to answer the question back.
Okay.
I also don't. I'm not planning the questions. But.
I have a question because we have been discussing this about data formats. We have now been talking mostly about imaging technologies and image matching technologies. So the descriptions of the iconography, formalized descriptions. So I mean, there's icon class, and I don't know what's else there in the field, and they should also be enriched by the information that artificial intelligence or image matching software generates. So that should feed back into the description, to my regard, and then be shared as open data as widely as possible. So is there any best practice or experimental projects in the landscape? So that's just a question because I know nothing about this.
Right. Thank you, Franz.
It'd be useful to know.
Thank you. I hear you a little bit scattered, so I hope I have your question right. Yes, well, the Warburg Institute has its own method of iconographic indexation developed from Vickover onwards. Now the icon class method of iconographic indexation is actually becoming the standard. For those of you who don't know what icon class is, I just post here the link. There is one possibility, I don't know if it will happen, to add also an icon number to the files of the Warburg in order to make these two systems talk at least. One, I mean, they can stay two separate systems with their own features, but it would be nice, and I always encourage these for different systems to at least interact and talk to one another. For what concern ontologies, if I understand your question, there is actually there is a very interesting article by Richard Gardner about ontologies for iconographic and new possibilities for automatic iconographic indexation. For what concerns my opinion is that the human eye is always the most reliable for what concerns the description and the interpretation, so iconography and iconology of an image. But then of course there are going to be development in this field as well. And yes, the icon class is now becoming the standard method of iconographic indexation. I posted the link.
Yeah. But does icon class include also information about individual objects, so like a woodcut, like a certain print, or even information about persons involved and their roles, so the woodcutter, the editor, also the works that are contained and accompanied by these illustrations? I think so, because it's a very complex material then, and just to be satisfied with a detailed description of the iconography is not sufficient for your approach.
No, it's not sufficient. I need more information, of course. Well, the icon class is again linked open data, and it has it's associated with specific identifiers, and it gives me like the possibility of adding the icon class numbers to for the description of an image. Again, there are some issues of metadata to insert. For instance, for the demo on woodblock, which I show you today because I took the opportunity to get some feedback. But for instance, there is the issue of a common nomination of this material. So how do we classify woodblocks and how do we rename them in a sort of shared and agreed upon way? I'm already working with how to rename the 16th century printed images, but woodblocks are again another level of research and of work that we need to agree upon somehow. So insofar as much as I know, there is no standard like European recognized standard, but if someone have it.
If you want to elaborate again on this topic, you made a longer post in the chat, so that this seems to be very relevant here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, since it will take a long time to describe all 14,000 woodblocks properly, we decided to create an image database with only the images of the prints of the blocks, and to describe them only with keywords, so that people are able to search in the image database. And if they need more detailed search options, they can go to our proper descriptive database. So, and we just opened up this image database also to stimulate creative people to reuse the images, so that they can have a new life in the creative industry.
Right. Yes.
And we hope that these basic keywords might evolve into icon class descriptions later on, but that would take a long time, of course, to do that for all these
Yes,
blocks.
of course.
Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you for explaining your method.
Any further questions here? So please take this opportunity. Otherwise, Barbara, if you have specific questions to the audience, I'm checking here.
That this graphicportal.org is doing a bit
Yeah.
of work standards. So thank you for this. And yes, thank you.
I think there is a community, so we just have to, or you have to constitute yourself and work towards a common and shared open standard.
Indeed. For woodblocks, again, it's a very recent that I dig into, but again, it's worthwhile doing it, definitely. Thank you for the feedback.
And Peter Bell, you are working on iconographic detection. What do you mean by that? I mean, I know a little bit, but in this context, this is also relevant, I suppose.
Yes. So I don't want to promise that we can get it to a level on as icon class. But last year we had a Google Summer of Code student who made an iconography detector just by learning from the RKD, the Dutch database of art, scenes from the biblical scenes from the life of Christ. And that worked quite well. And now, as we do mostly image understanding and object recognition and things like that inside one iconography, we now wanted to try also to have this very generic iconography detection, so that you as someone who wants to enrich data, you have some hints what iconographies you have, and of course this has to be polished often, but especially the very frequent iconographies are of course then by the learning process getting very getting a high confidence, because there's a lot of variance learned, and as the result was that also with a simple test, major iconographies could be detected automatically.
Right.
And this iconography is much more variant, I suppose, because it's not as stable as a print or as a woodcut. Is this correct, or did I miss it?
Okay. That's a challenging question, because I think also these woodcuts have a lot of stylistic differences, and what you also I think what neural networks really get crazy by is these different textures which are unique for woodcuts, as the way way it works, because it's so different to other media. So it's not so simple because it's black and white and looks simple. There's a lot of stylistic differences, very minimal old woodcuts, and this 17th century stuff, which is much more complex. So it's still challenging, yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Following up, I take the question of Celine Camp from Columbia University. Thank you, Celine, for joining us. So she has a question about the materiality. So the database take materials into account. That is, the database will include information about the kind of wood used to make the wood blocks. Hopefully, yes. I mean, it's one of the metadata that is actually interesting to include, and you know, you can also ideally include it not image by image in the name, but as a collection, a collection information. So it's one of the useful data that I would really like to include in the collections. So yes.
You also posted a mailing list, so for further communication and to establish a community that is taking care of these developments. So maybe everyone interested in this field should take use of this already existing mailing list. Otherwise, I suggest, we could also think about organizing an event in Venice, or I always like to come to Antwerp as well. So it's also close to Cologne, where my family lives, and have a workshop or conference on this topic. I think that should be easy to organize in times after the emergency of coronavirus. So let's hope for a better situation next year. But definitely something that would be worth doing.
Yes.
More questions? Yeah. More question, comments, suggestions. So I find the chat extremely useful today. A lot of information there. So we definitely keep this and will upload it with all the other materials, slides, and the video registration on GitHub and YouTube. And everything will be accessible from our website. So any further questions? Peter also posted a link for iconography. So we collect all this information and hope for, no, I'm still in. Okay, very good. Here's the link from Paolo from our GitHub repository. Okay. I think we can close the discussion. Thank you very much, Barbara. I think you really you have a project and a research question that goes to the heart of many things that are of interest in a wide context of book history, art history, and I think there's a lot of work to do, and with very promising experiences so far.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone in the audience. We will have our next seminar in 2 weeks' time. So that's our regular interval. So we just have been catching up the seminars that has been cancelled because of the start of the coronavirus emergency. So in 2 weeks, on the 13th of May, again Wednesday, 5 o'clock on Google Meet, Central European Time, we have Leonardo Campos. He's also a research fellow at the Venice Centre for Digital and Public Humanities, and he will be talking about his research project about the racial legislation that has been introduced in Italy during the fascist era in 1938 to suppress and exclude the Jewish fellow citizens from social and cultural life, and eventually to justify the deportation to the concentration camps of the German Nazi regime, and how these historical events would then, after the war, be remembered and communicated in the Italian state television and in the wider public. So the title will be Le Reggi Razziali in TV, tra audiovisivo, storia e pubblico. And we discussed today which language this presentation will be, because it's a very complex topic with Italian materials, of course. So it will be mostly in English, but intermixed with Italian. So everyone is invited, interested in this topic also from outside Italy with little or no knowledge of the Italian language. We will disseminate information and announcement via the known channels. Check our website, our Twitter account, and yeah, you will find what you are looking for. Okay, so usually we would meet now on Campo Margherita for an aperitivo in Venice. So, but we will catch up also these social gatherings in the next year, probably not earlier, unfortunately. So everybody stay safe and have a good evening. And I hope to see everyone again here or in a different occasion. Thank you very much, Barbara, and yeah, bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.